feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks and coming at you Thursday morning. It's April 10th. And coming up on today's show, we'll be joined by Wolves beat writer Chris Hine from the Star Tribune. He's been on the road with this team for the entirety of this 5-game road trip that they are on. I personally haven't been with the team since the game in Denver, so I was interested to get his perspective on sort of the vibe around this team the last 10 days that they've been on the road. We'll talk about Finch and the players, I guess, relatively muted response to the 24-point lead that they had after the game in Milwaukee. Chris was there to interview them after the game. That response didn't really square with me. I'm curious what Chris's perspective is on it. We'll also talk about zone defense being a weakness of this Wolves team, some numbers on that. And then on a more positive note, we'll get into Naz Reid and DiVincenzo really bouncing back in that Milwaukee game after rough stretches prior to the game in Milwaukee. And we'll also lay out how everything is still all right if they take care of business in Memphis tonight. They can move their way up the standings if they make that happen. Plus just some cool stories. Chris has been writing from behind the scenes with this team lately. That's all coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And first and foremost, we want to let you know that Falling Knife does again plan on having the TV truck outside by the patio like they did last spring for the Wolves in the playoffs. So for every Wolves playoff game, that will be out there. Whatever the Wolves playoff game is, bring a lawn chair, set up outside to watch the Wolves get there early to get a prime spot. I mean, hundreds, if not 1,000 people were out there for playoff games last year. Looked like a blast. Get there, bring that, a lawn chair to be able to hang out outside. Also, 3 games coming up in the regular season here too. You can go to Falling Knife tonight for Wolves Grizzlies. That might be a fun one, or Friday night for the game against Brooklyn, or matinee against Utah. If the Wolves are on, the game is on at Falling Knife with the sound and on their projection screens. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. We are now joined by Chris Hine. Been a while since we've been able to make this happen. You're in Memphis this morning on Thursday for game 5 of this 5-game road trip the Wolves are on. I think you've been on the road this entire month of April thus far. At this point in the season, are you like, I hate hotels, I'm done with airplanes, I can't wait for this to be over? Like, what is I know you like traveling. That's why you do this job. But like at this point of the season, you're like,
I will say, coming to Memphis, I actually connected through Minneapolis.
Oh, no.
Yesterday. Yeah, Milwaukee to Minneapolis to Memphis. And it's one of those things where you get off the plane and it's like, I kind of wish I was going home right now instead of waiting here another hour to catch another flight. It definitely hit me. The fatigue of this trip has definitely hit me here in Memphis and that's usually how it goes. The last city of a long road trip is usually where you feel it the most. So one more day, it's funny you say game 5 of this 5-game road trip. Watching that game the other night in Milwaukee and the way that the Wolves collapsed in the fourth quarter, it reminded me a lot of, I think it was game 3 of the Memphis series, or maybe it was game 4. I forget which game it was where they collapsed, and we're going to game 5 of that Memphis series 3 years ago. And the Wolves had this habit, or were starting this habit of collapsing late in games. And it just felt like it was predetermined that it was going to happen in that series. Right. And that's what it felt like watching that game the other night. I had flashbacks to that playoff series 3 years ago. And so to me, it's funny that they're trying to bounce back from what essentially was a problem that emerged in that Memphis series in Memphis tonight against a lot of that same core group from that series. A little irony, I think, for me, just observing the beat the last couple of years.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to just talk to you about, observing the beat on this 5-game road trip, just being around the team during this time. And I think that's probably the biggest question I think fans have right now of like, oh my gosh, I've been watching these games too, Chris, for 4 years since that Memphis series. And this keeps happening. And obviously you see it too. The frustration in the fan base is immense about this sort of pattern of behavior. Where do you think the players are at? I mean, I know it's not everybody on the team was there during the Memphis series, but a lot of the guys that were in the rotation were Jaden, Ant, Nas. You know, they've been here since these sort of collapses have been happening. I mean, I watched the interviews you guys did after the fact. It was another like, we're good, you know, it's chill. Like,
Yeah.
everything's all right. Like, what do you think that pattern to them is like going on in their head? Obviously, they're not freaking out to you when the microphones and stuff are on, but that's got to be an odd thing if your Aunt Jaden or Nas be like, we do this a lot, and that happened the year after Memphis as well. Where do you feel like they're just at with that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to think of the other night. I mean, I think I was a little surprised at just how optimistic they were, and I don't want to say it was performative, but it felt a little off to me. It all just kind of felt a little off.
Yeah.
I think if somebody was angry, and if somebody had said something along the lines of, this is unacceptable, we know we're a better team than this, we can't let this stand, you know, we'll address it and we'll move on and we'll be better. Like, if there was a little more anger or disappointment shown, I think it would have maybe helped a little bit in the aftermath of it. But I was a little struck by just how positive everybody sounded. And I think that's out of necessity, given where they are in the season, that it's better to be too positive than too negative at this point in the season, right? Because if you go too negative, then the wheels will be coming off. But I think there's a line you can walk there between anger, disappointment, and optimism moving forward. And I just thought it was maybe a little too far in one direction. I think it was okay to maybe let some anger show and some disappointment show after that, instead of trying to put on this brave face of, we're gonna be okay, everything's gonna be fine, and it may be fine.
Yeah,
I mean, listen, it's not out of the realm of possibility. They win tonight, and all of a sudden things are better 48 hours later. That's definitely true. But as always, we, as fans, you maybe look at the road trip, or as journalists, you look at the road trip, you come into the road trip and you're like, okay, a 5-game road trip, couple of tough games. You've got Denver, you've got Memphis, you've got Milwaukee, right?
Yeah.
Good teams on this road trip. At this point in the road trip, if you had said before the trip that the Wolves would be 3-1 on this road trip going into Memphis, and they would have lost to Milwaukee, everybody would have been, okay, that's not a bad road trip so far, right?
Right.
You know, but the way in which it happens,
we watched the game.
Devil is in the details, right? The devil is in the details. It's not the big picture view. It's we watched what happened in that Milwaukee game, and you're 10 minutes away and a 24-point lead away from being 4-0 on this trip, and being the 4 seed versus being the 8 seed right now. It's just,
well, dude, and even if they get to 6, like that I was thinking about this too, because and anybody who's listening, go watch John and Chris and Leah interview the players after the game in the locker room in Milwaukee, and maybe pick up on some of the sentiment that we're talking about. But as I watched that like yesterday afternoon, and I'm, you know, and I've also just like recently looked at all the tiebreakers and stuff like this, and I'm like, the thing for me is that now you can be the 6 seed, basically. I know there's a world and a pathway through tiebreakers that they could get back to the 4, but there was kind of like the sentiment that I was getting from it is like, all right, if we take care of business in Memphis, which again, they can and maybe will, we're good. We're out of the plan. We're the 6th seed. And I just think that like dismisses the typical value of the 6th seed. And I know the West is more jumbled this year and all this sort of stuff, but now you can be like basically the 6th seed. And there's a very big difference, in my opinion, of being the 6th seed versus the 4 seed, and what like kind of your implied advantages are with that. And it felt like the energy when they were talking about it afterwards was dismissing that differential between the two and the value of home court advantage that I think they almost certainly would have had. Now you're the 6th, and I encourage you to go watch the first half of the Lakers-Mavericks game, because if you're the 6th seed, you're probably getting the 3, and you got to play that pissed off Slovenian dude from the Lakers. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yep.
The 6th seed, is great. And to be fair, that's what I've been saying the whole time. We've all been kind of saying that, like, get there, get out of the play-in. But again, the devil's in the details. And it's like there was an opportunity for the 4 here. Actually, even as high as the 3 at one point earlier this week. And now you're kind of, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is, but that's the part I couldn't square about how Finch reacted to you guys. And then I think it was Julius, Dante, and Ant when they talked to you. It's like, yeah, I get it. Never too high, never too low, but you let something slip there. And in a fashion that you have done, I don't know, 10 times over I mean, this one was pretty egregious, 23-0 run, but I don't know that it didn't square up to me. And it signaled a disconnect at least between how I'm thinking about this and how it seems like they're thinking about this.
I don't disagree with any of that. Like I said, it felt like it went a little, the post-game reaction went a little too far in that we're okay direction. I guess I just think there was an acknowledgement of, there could have been an acknowledgement of what was lost, the lack of urgency in the moment to realize what you're playing for. Because Britt on your show yesterday put it well. It's like there's not many times with 4 games left in the regular season that you drop 4 places in the standings in one night. That's right. It's hard for me. It's been hard for me. I've been trying to process how I've kind of felt about what happened on Tuesday night. Is it a one-off? Is it a wake-up call? And you'd like to think that it's a wake-up call, but as
it's not a one-off.
Said, it's not a one-off. As you said yesterday, it's baked into their DNA at this point. And it's one of the fatal flaws of this team that they have to work around and try to avoid if they want to make a deep playoff run here. I think that there was a way to react a little more, not like a fan or acquiesce to what fans were feeling, but I think there was a disconnect, and I think fans would have liked to have seen maybe a little more urgency in the post-game messaging than there was the other night. Yeah. Now, listen, the Ant said tonight is essentially, it's the biggest game of the season, blah, blah, blah. So, if they lose this one or if they drop this one, what's the reaction going to be then, right? Mm-hmm. And because now you've put it all on this game. So if they don't get it done tonight, then what's the reaction? And then where do you go from here? Because now you've essentially punted on Tuesday by placing all your eggs in tonight's basket. And so now you got to get it done tonight.
I was thinking about, the baked into the DNA thing, and I stand by that. I mean, it is. This just happens over and over again. But another thing to do the glass half full side of it that's baked into their DNA is when things look bad, they have a way of kind of letting that go and bouncing back. And, I'm flashing back to the Phoenix games at this time last season, right? And we're like, oh man, they lost to Phoenix again in game 82. They got swept by Phoenix every game that they played them last season during the regular season. Yeah. And then sure enough, we go to Phoenix and they beat their ass, like this wild shifting is also a part of their DNA for the better part too, the upswing. And I don't know, I'm writing the notes down for all this stuff. And I'm like, if this was any other team, it's just some team that I've been paying attention to watching, this month or something, I'd be like, yeah, talented, but immature, and I just think, or youthful, young, not having it all together. And I just think as we sit here today, before they play this Memphis game tonight, I don't know how there's any other primary belief or understanding you can have of this team while acknowledging, like, yeah, you got Ant. We saw this last year. We saw this team dial it up and be more than we thought they could be when the playoffs came around. But I don't know, just the body of work screams this is a team whose best player is 23 years old and is not in his prime yet and does not do all the handling of things and managing of the game and emotions in the locker room and stuff that maybe a prime superstar would have. And I know Finch is related to this and all the players, but it's just, I don't think we've done enough acknowledging that this is in fact just a young, youthful, at times immature team this season, even though they do have Mike Conley, even though they do have Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, guys in their 30s. I don't know how we could call this team anything other than that right now. Doesn't ruin their odds of going to the Western Conference Finals. I'm not saying that. It's just, if we're painting an identity, how could we say, what is the argument that it's anything other than this?
I think about this in the context of Ant, and he was because he is the team's best player, and like you said, for all the guys in their 30s on this team, when you go as your best player goes, right? Essentially in the NBA, for all the maturity that may be around him at times. I think about him because he is the ultimate positive leader, right? That's how he leads. He is not negative a lot. He is always trying to hype up his teammates. He's always trying to be optimistic. This is how he is. And so I was thinking about just what we've seen from Ant, especially the last couple seasons and this season too. It seems like Ant he tries to put on the positive face, the positive spin, but there have been moments this season where he has not turned, but like he's felt that the team has needed a shift. Remember when he said in November after that loss to the Kings that we can't talk to each other, we need to get better, that post-game press conference. And I think they came out of that and they won like 4 or 5 straight games. Right. And then in January, when it was his own individual play about dealing with the double teams and I don't know what's going on with the double team. He was clearly frustrated with the double teams, right? After that Celtics game in early January. And then what happened? He started playing great in January and February after that, right? Absolutely. So it seems like when he gets to those moments of expressing the public frustration, right? That's when the team responds, or that's when he responds. And he wasn't there the other night in Milwaukee. He wasn't there with the public frustration. He was still in very rah-rah, pump up everybody, we're going to be fine mode, right? He wasn't where he was after that Kings loss. He wasn't where he was individually after that Celtics game. So I wonder at what point does he get to that? Or does just the positive attitude work, tonight against Memphis and then going into the playoffs? And we've seen him level up in the playoffs. I think, he takes it upon himself to find that other gear to really ramp up when the playoffs roll around. It's just how he is at this point. But I think in the context of how Ant and how the team has responded to Ant this season, when Ant has expressed frustration, whether with himself or with the team publicly, they always respond he always responds when that happens. He wasn't there the other night. So I wonder just how much urgency that's going to create for the rest of the team. We will see.
Yeah, it didn't square for me and was quite frankly surprised. I wasn't at that game, but you start seeing the tweets come through from you and John and reading your guys' stories. And I was like, oh, because I'm with you. I would have expected at time that was some sort of, because it has been when things have hit a low, they're publicly acknowledged, maybe talked about internally, a film session, something like that. And again, it doesn't matter what they say to us. It's not that. It's It's that urgency that we felt at different times of the season, whether it be publicly or just being around the team or what we've even heard about after the fact. And maybe that is something that you guys will get tonight in Memphis. Oh, we did this once we got to Memphis and film session and yada, yada, yada. But
I will say they're shooting around today, which is something that they haven't done on the road recently. They've either practiced the day before games and then not shot around, or they just haven't shot around on this road trip. So this is a little different routine for them coming into this Memphis game. So I wonder if that's a little bit a part of the shakeup to get a little more urgency, is having this shoot around. So it's just a little footnote as we enter tonight that they're shooting around for the first time in a while.
Grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And if you are in the market for buying or selling your home in Minnesota or Wisconsin, that's where Adriana is licensed. I would love it if you would go to her. The incentive we have behind this to sign up for a free consultation session with her is you're entered to win some Wolves tickets. So however many of you sign up for these consultations, we'll pull names and we'll get you some lower level tickets to a Wolves game. But part of the buying or selling process is having someone who's familiar in the space. And Adriana is, again, in Minnesota and Wisconsin. I really would recommend signing up for one of these free consultations. I know a number of listeners have. You can get information on Adriana at Coldwell Banker Realty by going to thedancingrealtor.com. That's in the show notes. Or you can just call or text her at 715-304-9920. Approach it as a relationship where she's getting to know you, you're getting to know how this side of the business works, and and find a common ground of what it is that you want out of this process. I really would recommend this. Again, thedancingrealtor.com, or you can call or text Adriana at 715-304-9920. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks, and I looked up what we got the Wolves Grizzlies game going on because we're doing a day of pod, and I said, give me all the guys who I feel confident are gonna go full effort here and understand the gravity of this game. Give me Mike Conley more than 14.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. Dante DiVincenzo to have more than 18.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. Rudy Gobert to have more than 26 points plus rebounds plus assists. Those are the guys I feel very confident will be dialed tonight. Then you got to put a player from another team. I mean, you could throw a Masters one in there. But I had Zach Edey on there. I know he's been playing really well recently. I'm not sure how much they'll go with him in this game. So I said less than 23.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. That's what that's this Wolves Grizzlies game. You'll have time to, if you listen to this afternoon, to put together a lineup. Obviously, master stuff all weekend as well. Bunch of fun stuff you can be doing there over the course of the weekend. PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app. If you don't have an account, use the promo code Dane, and your account will be credited with $50 when you make your first $5 lineup.
I'm disappointed. I was waiting for your Masters breakdown. I need some Masters picks here.
Yeah, listen to the Monday pod with Jace. You know that's
okay. That's true. Yeah, I need to join your pod with Jace to get Jace's breakdown of the Masters. Yeah,
it's I believe his was Patrick Reed. He loves. I think he took Scotty Scheffler. So
okay,
yeah, but I'm sure he'll have it on the TV and be upset on Sunday when he's watching it.
When he's watching it because it's the middle of the afternoon that we have to cover that game.
Right. He's going to be talking to us, just angrily.
He's going to be in his zone. He's going to be in his zone. Yep.
Speaking of zone, look at that. That's what I want.
What a segue.
I know. I mean, dude, that part of the post game stuff, I was like, what? You blamed it all on the zone? I mean, right, so I was looking this up. No team in the league, or not no team. The Wolves have seen the 8th most zone possessions this season against them, right? Teams often go to zone against the Wolves, right? You got Gobert, McDaniels, Randall out there. At the same time, it just kind of makes sense, right? Of just the basic concepts of shooting. And then you factor in the Wolves lacking ability to make effective passing in there, where they turn the ball over a million times. They have the highest turnover rate against zone defenses in the entire NBA this season. Ooh. So this is like, I mean, I know Julius said in the post game, he's like, Miami played a lot of zone against us. We played really well a couple weeks ago. It's like, yeah, Julius played really well in that game. Remember that was like one of his near triple double. I mean, there's a way that you need to play against zone to be able to beat it. There's a way you need to think through a zone to be able to beat it. And obviously, that was not there in Milwaukee for the entirety of the fourth quarter. I just rewatched it this morning, and I put a little bit more blame on Finch when Britt and I talked yesterday than I normally have this season. Specific to the zone stuff, man, they tried different things. They were trying to screen through it. They're trying to different routes to getting guys to the middle of the floor. It wasn't just like Finch being like, "Okay, go break it." There was timeouts, different things they were trying to get to there. The players didn't execute against it. I mean, I guess just sort of your thoughts on the commentary surrounding the zone after the game.
Yeah, I from the 30,000 foot view, and that's kind of what it was, given how far away the press seat was in Milwaukee's arena.
That was like a determining factor for you to drive down.
From the 30,000 foot view of I noticed that too. In game that they were trying different ways to initiate the offense, screening the top of the zone, trying to get Ant going downhill against it, flashing different people into the middle, trying to do different things to break it. They just bad passing into the middle there, or they were trying to force passes that weren't there. They weren't moving quite too crisply. I guess one of the things that, was missing the ball, the body movement off ball, the screening of the zone off the ball. Like, you could still screen a zone off ball and try to create, cuts for people. That wasn't really happening.
Nope.
They were, like I said, they were trying to screen the top of it and try ways to get Ant going, but it wasn't working. And honestly, they should look at a zone defense as an opportunity, and Ant should look at a zone as an opportunity, because they're not going to double him out of a zone. Like, it's one of the few times, especially late in game, that the defense is not set up to double Anthony Edwards
100%
in a zone. Like, there's going to be ways for you to drive. There's going to be, if you move the ball, you'll get it back in an advantageous position to shoot a catch and shoot three, perhaps. Like, they should look at a zone defense as an opportunity, not a quiz that they have to figure out. And I think that's what's most disheartening is try to flip the dynamic on its head. Look, they're in zone. Like, this is a time that we could, if we move the ball around and move Ant around a little more, like, we could get the ball to our best player in open slots in the defense or open for a three. And they just, I think that's how they have to look at the zone going forward. Is like, all right, team is in zone. Let's figure out the best way to get the ball to Ant where he can do the most damage, because they're not going to double him. So
I think you're absolutely right.
That's how they have to look at it. Whether it's having somebody else initiate the offense and Ant plays more off ball to start the possessions, instead of having him start the possessions by screening at the top of the zone, have Mike do it, or let Julius handle to start the possessions and get the ball moving that way. Have Jaden flash to the middle, and then all of a sudden, as the defense collapses, maybe Ant flashes to the wing or the corner and he's got an open three. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Yeah. So moving. Maybe having him play moving players, and not having Ant have the ball in his hands, maybe to start these possessions is one way to address it.
Yeah, I would add it to the list of, like, look out for this in the playoffs. I think if you or somebody asked Julius about it after the game, like, do you think he'll see more of this? Wasn't Julius like, well, if they're smart, probably. Like, they're probably going to do it to us. We're clearly not very good at it.
Yeah.
I do think I would note, and this is an important thing, as we've talked about the getting out of the play-in from a rest standpoint. And that's for sure true. All of the players, told us about that last year, dodging the play-in and the value of that. But another part that I remember this from talking to some of the coaches last year, it was also really important and valuable to be able to practice and be coached and specific. Like, you knew that this is how Phoenix was going to play. I mean, that was an advantageous thing of, right, last season they played Phoenix in game 82. They just did that, like, load up the gap help against Ant. And then in practice for the week, the Wolves practiced against that defensive look over and over again. And by the time the first round of the playoffs came around, Ant was ready to cook against, and then he did. So I think the avoiding the play-in is important, obviously from a fatigue standpoint, where we've seen that be an Achilles heel of this team, but also just, like, they're going to have a pretty good idea of how their opponent is going to guard them, or a very good idea of how their opponent is going to try to play offense against them, whoever it is, if it's a 3-6 or whoever the first round opponent is. There is value, I think, particularly with this team, to have time to be coached on, this is what they're going to do, and this is what we're going to do against it. Because I think there have been many examples over the course of this season, this most recent one being maybe the most egregious of the season, where a team springs a different defense on you in the fourth quarter and they go on a 23-0 run. But there's been a lot of other breadcrumbs like this that suggest that when something is presented new to the Wolves or something that they're not expecting, there is a slower reaction time to figuring it out than there would be their contemporaries around the rest of the league. I made a big deal about that 60 thing at the beginning. I do still think the number one thing is just avoiding the play-in, and largely for those reasons.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because I remember in the playoffs last year, we go there for end of practice media availabilities. And at the beginning of the week of preparation, whether it was for Phoenix or for Denver, which they also had a lot of time to prepare for because they swept Phoenix, the players were walking out of the facility with binders that were essentially the game plan and scouting reports for Phoenix or Denver, right? So if you are in the play-in, and let's say they end up as the 8 seed, right? You have essentially 1 day off between that 8 seed game and when the playoffs begin on Sunday, as you head to Oklahoma City in that instance.
Good luck.
So there's not a lot of time to read that binder on Oklahoma City, right? There's not a lot. You have one practice day essentially, and maybe a shoot around to really drill down what Oklahoma City is going to do to you in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference. You can mitigate that by being the 7 seed. If you're the 7 seed and you win the playing game on Tuesday, you've got 3 days off before you would play Houston in Houston, or at least 3 days off before you would play Houston in Houston. So that even being the 7 seed gives you that advantage of a little bit more time to prepare, maybe a couple good practice days,
sure,
two good practice days ahead of the opening. But yeah, it puts them in a place where they would be at a disadvantage because more time was an advantage for this team in the postseason a year ago.
Yep.
Being able to really drill down the scouting report, figure out every little nuance that a team is going to defend against you. And the Lakers, I think they would throw a lot at them in a playoff series, just given the lack of size. So I don't think the Lakers would be afraid to try pretty much anything. So preparing for any kind of contingency, that would be super helpful.
Dude, just like a bunch of different coverages against Luka too, just like defensively, like, hey, we're doing this. Like there's gonna to playing a great player like that. The most important, Finch says this all the time, right? It's throwing like a diversity of coverages at them, and that's really how you slow down a Luka and Ant too. We see the inverse of that. I mean, I think specific to a Lakers matchup, time is extremely important to feel comfortable with not just like your game plan, but a couple of game plans, if that makes sense, like pivots off of it. That matters. I wanted to.
That's 100%.
Sorry. I wanted to. I think a positive from the Bucks game we wanted to get to was Dante DiVincenzo and Naz Reid played really well in that game. I was looking at it in Naz's previous 4 games before Milwaukee. He was averaging 8, 4, and 2 in those 4 games, which is a far cry from what he was doing when he was starting, which was 18, 9, and 3. He's still been shooting it decently from 3. He hasn't been as good recently, but seeing him come around after being 8, 4, and 2 for the previous 4 games was encouraging. And then DiVincenzo was kind of the same thing in the 4 previous games, was 8, 2, and 3. And those guys, I mean, we can talk about what they looked like in that game, but that's just something we know about this team. I think particularly with Naz and Dante, there's a extremely different ceiling to this team when you're getting like 80th percentile performances or better from them versus 20th percentile or worse performances from them. Nikhil's going to kind of give you in that 8th man role the same thing night after night. He's extremely consistent. And, that's a credit to Nikhil. The value of Dante and Naz is they can be more than consistent, right? They can be a star in a given night. And I thought for the most part, they were trending in the direction towards being those type of players in Milwaukee. So if there's a signal for a turn of how they've been flowing recently, since Naz and Dante got ejected in that Detroit game, just kind of seemed out of rhythm a little bit. I felt like they got back in rhythm, and again are making sense as key main pieces to this Wolves team in this final stretch.
The early version of the game story that nobody will ever see because it got deleted with about 6 minutes left in the 4th quarter was the Naz and Dante are back game story, right?
Sure.
That one joined the Game 7 losing in Denver gamer that I had ready once upon a time as well, to be deleted and never seen again. Yeah, and we asked Finch about that. John asked Finch about that before the game. I asked Finch about it in practice in Philadelphia, just kind of what was out of rhythm a little bit with these guys. Where did they need to get back into it? And Finch said that they have the ultimate green light, but he felt like they were maybe forcing shots a little too much at times, especially early in their shifts, right? Just to try to get going. He said, I think both could benefit from letting the game come to them just a little bit easier, a little bit more naturally. And, again, for 3 quarters the other night, it looked pretty good. Right. And they were letting the game come to them, and they were on fire. They were playing well off of each other. Teammates were finding them. Like it was the Nas and Dante vision for how that bench unit looks, like the best version of it. And then, that's what was so stunning about the fourth quarter collapse was it didn't start with Ant on the floor. It started with, the great net rating lineup that they had out there. And that included Nas and Dante, 2 guys who were on fire that night. Yeah. And 2 guys who you would think would help shoot a team out of a zone, sure. Right? And that's just what was so puzzling about the fourth quarter collapse was just play kind of how you were playing the previous 3 quarters, especially with that unit before Ant checked back in. And it felt like they would have been okay they would have mitigated that. But for some reason, even that unit, the net rating warriors that were out there, yep. they collapsed too. This wasn't all on Ant being 23. The collapse started when Ant was on the bench, and it started with that unit. And that's what was so puzzling about it was that unit should have been better at mitigating and not. I think it was maybe a 10-0 run, like it got to 14 or 12 or something like that before Finch went back to Ant. But it all started with that unit, and that's what was so puzzling because Nas and Dante had been playing so well up until that point.
Well, so I think it was interesting. And I love this. I was tweeting about it during the game, like in the third quarter, right? That typically the first sub that the Wolves do is they bring in DiVincenzo and Reid for Conley and Randall, right? That's normal in the first quarter and the third quarter. And what they did, or what Finch did in the third quarter, was he brought in DiVincenzo and Reid for Conley and Gobert. So now, instead of Gobert being out there with this bench group that has Nas and Dante out there with them, you have Randall out there as the other big. So it's the 5-out look, right? It's that we've seen that group has had these offensive boomlets when they can spread the floor, and it kind of felt like the perfect time for it. It worked. They go on this run where at halftime the score was 56-45. The Wolves had the lead. And by the end of the fourth quarter, because that group spread the floor, Dante and Nas were hitting threes. They're up 90-70 by the time the fourth quarter, begins. And then at that point, Finch brings Conley and Gobert back in to play with Alexander Walker, DiVincenzo, and Reid. And that's the lineup for basketball lovers. That's the net rating group that had at that time a net rating on the season of plus 32.9 when the next best net rating in the league is like plus 24. It's like been the most effective group. And I was like, wow, Finch, like this worked. Like you played the right card to spread the floor in the third. Now you can come back and go with this group to start the fourth, who wins their minutes, right? You're like, it's like it's, we always talk about the non-Jokic minutes for the Nuggets. This is like the Wolves non-Jokic card, the non-Ant card that they play that works almost every time. And it went the complete opposite direction. And Milwaukee did spring the zone on that group. I think that group's probably a little bit more in general, like you get to pick and roll with Mike and Rudy. That's kind of your basis with the other 3 guys spreading and moving around them. And the zone gummed that up. And that group didn't work. But I was liking the flow of it. I'm like, okay, good move. Now you're with this group. Then Ant's going to come back, shut it down. 3 seed, here they come. But that group did falter. And it's a reminder that it's not just because a group has a net rating of plus 30, something doesn't mean they can't get cracked as they did at that time.
Yeah. I think they got a couple good looks to start it. You know, I think Finch referenced that, but then those misses just snowballed, and the Bucks got out in transition. Nikhil, I think the start of it was Nikhil fouled. I want to say Porter, or maybe it was Green, on a 3 that went in, and it was a 4-point play, and that was the start of the run. It went from 24 to 20 because of a 4-point play, and
right.
It was kind of I don't want to say like the perfect thing to start a 23-0 run, but like if you're going to start a 23-0 run, starting with a 4-point play is kind of the way you want to do it, because
that's the most.
It's a frustrating play for the other team to be like, what are we doing? We're up 24. Why are we fouling somebody while they're shooting a 3? And it gets them out of sorts, and it just seemed like it just snowballed. But I think that's one of the takeaways too from the other night, was that this was not all, yes, that there was plenty that the Ant-led lineups can learn from this, but it didn't start with Ant.
Yep.
It started with everybody else. Everybody had a hand in this one the other night. Everybody did.
Today's show is brought to you by PXG. Spring is here. It's Masters Week. The time has come to get some new golf clubs, and that means it's time to head to your local PXG store for a fitting. PXG makes the best golf clubs, period. I went over to PXG at Southdale Mall a few weeks back to get fitted for clubs, and I was really just kind of blown away by the technology of it. I wasn't familiar with what PXG does. The value of having clubs that actually fit right is extremely valuable. Have a bend to the head that is in accordance to your swing, a weight to the club head. I had no idea how much of a difference that makes of just simply being able to hit the ball straight. The putters too. I was like, okay, this feels like cheating. It is really the fastest way to improve your performance on the golf course by getting a PXG fitting. You can schedule your fitting today. Again, if you're in the city, Southdale Mall has a PXG store in there. That's where I went. They have the bays to be able to practice your swing and work with a fitter there. You can schedule your fitting today, and for a limited time, you can save up to 20% on your entire order. Head over to pxg.com/DaneMoore. That's in the show notes below. That's pxg.com/DaneMoore to save up to 20% on your entire order. pxg.com/DaneMoore. Restrictions apply. See site for details. Let's do a little bit of standings. I just want to go over where we're at here on Thursday, and I guess this works for if people are listening to this on Friday morning as well. You can update the standings accordingly. The Warriors lose last night. Everyone else in the West wins. So as we're looking at it right now, the Wolves are at 8, 46 and 33. Golden State's 47 and 33. Memphis is 47 and 32. The Wolves' opponent tonight. Lakers 48 and 32. Nuggets 48 and 32. Lakers 49 and 31. And I probably should have been on this earlier, but the realization I came to last night, Chris, was you win this game and you're good. You're in there. And the reason for that is not because you're going to instantly be vaulted into the top 6 by that win. The reason you're in a great position if you're the Wolves, if you win tonight, is because Memphis and Denver have to play each other on Friday. So one of them have to lose. Golden State and the Clippers play each other on Sunday. So one of them have to lose. So you are getting a guaranteed 2 losses into this 3 through 8 mix in the time of the rest of the season. Plus, there's a lot of teams, man. It's 5. Another one of these teams could have a game like the Wolves had against the
Warriors.
Bucks.
Lost to this, and the Warriors lost to the Spurs last night. So
Harrison Barnes, man. Yeah.
Yep.
So there is just, if the Wolves take care of business against Memphis and then clean up the Nets and Jazz over the weekend, which again, no locks in that, particularly with this team. There's a little bit of a deep breath reminder that, I don't know, maybe the players understood when you were interviewing them in the locker room of we're all right if, we're still going to get out of the play-in if we take care of business in Memphis. I just wanted to make sure that we point out that Memphis and Denver play each other and Golden State and the Clippers still play each other.
Yeah, I think that's what they were referring to. Is I think everybody kind of recognized that, but again, they got to win or else they're probably going to be 8 coming into this. So yeah, there's still a lot going on. I think Houston figures into this a little bit. I think Houston plays. do they play Denver? I want to say they play Denver at
They
some point,
play
right?
relevant teams in every game. I know
In
that.
every game, right? Yeah,
One
yeah.
of those teams, but Houston last night did not play. I mean, Jalen Green played, but it was like Van Vliet,
Well,
Brooks, a bunch of guys
what.
didn't play because
Yeah,
they're locked into the 2.
yeah.
They have no incentive.
That's exactly it. So how heavily does Houston
Mhm.
figure into this, knowing that they've locked up the 2 seed, essentially? Yeah. So I don't know. They got the Lakers in Denver left. It appears so. On paper, important matchups, but just how hard are they going to attack those matchups as well figures into this. And I can't imagine that Sunday, against Denver, that they're going to be going full throttle, right? So you can't really bank on that.
I would hold on for maybe the Friday game against the Lakers. I was watching that game last night. Not all of it. Guys sat, but not everyone sat. It wasn't like a full clearing. And and Houston is kind of like one of those teams. Is like they're an effort team. We're gonna try. That's baked into their identity. Plus, they know they
might
have
be
that
some
week
pride.
off. Yeah, I just
yeah.
I don't think initially when I was going through it, I'm like, oh, Houston locked up the 2 seed, like LLL, for them the rest of the way. I'm not sure that I mean, I'd rather the Lakers be playing the Rockets than like the Jazz, or like one of the tanking teams.
Right.
I think what's going to happen over the course of the weekend, and the Wolves could be one of these teams, somebody's going to lose a dumb game. There's just too many teams. I mean, there's too many teams, 3 through 8. That's 6 teams, and they all play patsies. And even if you look at the odds and you're like, well, everyone, is money lines like plus 1,000, the team has a 10% chance at winning. Well, it's still a 10% chance, and you're running that like a bunch of times. I do think one of these tanking teams is going to have a gross win over one of these teams contending for a playoff spot. So you factor that in, plus the Memphis Denver thing, the Golden State Clippers thing. Like there's still room for the Wolves to actually not only get 6, but if they get a little bit more of that luck, Houston or a tanking team winning a game, there's room to jump up there a little bit higher, particularly if they find themselves in a tiebreaker with the Clippers or the Nuggets. Again, for listeners, that's what you want. You want them to be in tiebreakers with Denver and the Clippers. And actually, you almost want a 3-team tiebreaker. You do want a 3-team tiebreaker if Golden State or Memphis is in the mix with the Wolves, because then that 4-0 against Denver or that 3-0 against the Clippers, counterbalances your losing.
That's what I was going to say is I haven't really looked at it, but what happens if, okay, so Golden State's got 33 losses. The Wolves have 33 losses. Let's say the Wolves win tonight. They beat Memphis. So now Memphis will join the group of 33 lost teams, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What happens if Denver then beats Memphis and then the Clippers beat the Warriors? Well, at that point, the Warriors would be behind the Wolves. So that would be advantageous.
And Memphis would too at that point. You said Denver beats Memphis.
And Memphis would too. Yeah. Okay. So that would boost the Wolves up to 6 because they'd be a game clear. I'm just trying to think of scenarios where, like, I guess to your point, like they're good, because in my head I'm trying to game it out, and it's like, oh well, if Denver loses to Memphis and the Wolves beat Memphis, then Memphis is behind the Wolves, and if the Clippers beat the Warriors, then the Warriors are behind the Wolves. So yeah, they would avoid those tiebreakers where those teams would be involved. I haven't looked at like what the multi-team iterations are for tiebreakers either. Like, what if it's Denver, Golden State, and Memphis all tied together?
I gotcha.
With the Wolves. How does that
Shout
work?
out to Chase.
Oh, please. Oh, great.
So awesome. Memphis, Golden State.
Worked through this. Okay, good.
Yeah. If this is the 4-way tie between Memphis, Golden State, Memphis, and Denver, which is within the realm of possibilities, that Golden State has the number 1 tiebreaker, and that Memphis has the number 2, and that Minnesota has 3, Denver has 4. So that kind of illuminates what you're trying to avoid here is a tiebreaker, a 1-to-1, a 2-team tiebreaker with Memphis or Golden State for sure, right? You lose those tiebreakers.
Yeah.
But you really want to avoid a tiebreaker that has both of them. If they end the season with the same record as Memphis and Golden State, and even if there's another Denver or LA team in there, the Wolves are going to get pushed down. And that's probably how they find their way out of the top 6, is specifically a tiebreaker with 2 of Memphis, one or two of Memphis and Golden State in there. So
right.
the best thing is what you laid out, get ahead of Memphis and Golden State. So you can't tie break with them, be in a tie break situation with them. And then, if that's the case, then, the world is yours. You can tie with Denver, tie with the Clippers, whatever you got all those, go multi-team. They're going to climb in that sort of way. The biggest thing is the importance of this Memphis matchup. It's more than two birds.
It's all moot. It's all moot if they lose tonight.
Last thing I know, because you got to run over to practice here, but I mean, as long or as short as you want to go on. I thought that film story that you did about the young guys, was that Sunday's paper maybe?
Yes.
was really well done. You want to tease a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. So the player development staff with the Wolves this year has been running an extra film session with some of the younger guys on the team, kind of the end of bench guys who in the rookies and guys that don't really play that much on a night to night basis. But they've been running this extra kind of 5 to 10 minute film session before every game where they kind of reiterate some of the points of the scouting report. They talk about individual player tendencies for guys that play heavy minutes on the opponent that night, just so that the young guys are just getting this information reinforced and just learning the league, learning how certain teams like to play, what their offensive styles are. And again, just here's Kevin Durant. Here are the individual things that he likes to look for or go to when he's got the ball on certain parts of the floor, things like that. So they've been learning the league like that. They've been doing it very interactively via Kahoot. They've been running quizzes all year and they're competing against each other. One of the player development coaches will stop the film and ask a trivia question. And, Kahoot is based on not just if you get it right, but how quickly you get it right. Yeah. And apparently nobody can beat Luka Garza and Josh Minot in this. And it's very frustrating for some of the rookies on the team that they can't get past those two guys. And I think the story also illuminates one of the reasons why this team is very high on Luka Garza, right? And just what they love about Luka is his dedication and preparation. And because the genesis of this started because of their playoff preparation last year, to kind of segue with what we were talking about earlier, Luka, through their scout work and scout team work, got to know the opponents, especially in the Denver series, so well that he was calling stuff out from the bench.
Dude, because he was Jokic,
series.
Right?
He was Jokic he was Jokic in practice. So he knew what the Nuggets were trying to get to and trying to run. So yeah, he was calling stuff out from the bench for the team in the Denver series. And because he knew it so well, the player development staff was like, how can we do this during the hectic schedule of the season that you can't get into that level of detail like they did against Denver, but you could do this throughout the course of a year. And then as you see teams multiple times, this information starts to stick. So yeah, it's something that they've done all year. They do it every game with about 50 minutes left on the clock, the warm-up clock. And yeah, you'll see them. I saw them the other day, just kind of huddled in one of the coaches' auxiliary locker rooms. And, they're going over the film and the opponent that night. And that's before the team gathers as a whole, maybe about 15, 20 minutes before the team gathers as a whole to go over the full game plan for that night.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them do it at Target Center. I didn't know there was the Kahoot quiz part of it, but it's like Rob Dillingham, Jalen Clark, Terrence Shannon Jr., Leonard Miller, Luka Garza, Josh Minot. Probably any of the two-way guys. That are there. But everybody that's basically out of the rotation. I thought the genesis of how this came together was a really cool anecdote in there about that it started at this time last season with Luka and Josh being on the scout team. I did when I was reading it to your point about Luka and that he does know all this stuff. He has obviously been labeled as such a hard worker and is for sure those things. I was thinking about how, when you and I are doing like a wrapping up the season, we're reviewing the bigs, right? We get to Luka Garza. What we're going to talk about is when Luka Garza got his opportunity earlier this season and frankly got cooked, in that Bulls. He was overwhelmed. There was a step behind. He was missing his bunnies and stuff like that. And this put in my head a little bit of like, I don't know. Luka's going to always have some foot speed problem defensively in that. But it just made me think, I think he was just pressing a lot because he's like, I finally got this opportunity. I've been grinding with this team, waiting for opportunities, learning everything I can for so long, that when he got that opportunity, I think he was pressing. And it just leaves me a little bit of like, if Luka gets another opportunity in a year, maybe this team doesn't have as many bigs next season and he is like a 10-minute-a-night guy, maybe there can be something else from Luka with when he puts together preparation with a little bit more confidence, of executing it out on the floor. But I mean, to echo your point from the coaching staff, front office, whatever, I've heard nothing but great things about Luka Garza for 3 years now that he's been here.
And that's exactly why they, like having him on the team, and why, in spite of maybe what happened during that stretch, why, you could see him being on the team for the foreseeable future because of the example and the tone that he sets for some of the younger guys on the team.
Yeah, and the number one thing of I think where this is practically shown up this season is with Jalen Clark, right? Basically, the idea behind this whole thing is if and when you are called on, you are going to be ready to go to perform your role and understand what your duties are, specifically defensively against the opponent. And if Jalen Clark has not been the poster boy of that readiness, then I don't know what is. And I think this, with Nate and James and the assistants who are running this thing, I think they I mean, obviously Jalen deserves credit for getting himself back from an Achilles and stuff, but part of what's made this Jalen Clark thing so cool is just how ready he was from the jump and how consistently ready he's been. And film study plays a huge role in that. Chris, I know you got to go to practice. I appreciate you squeezing this in, but before heading over there, you guys can read that work on the Star Tribune, and then obviously we'll be pumping the book here in the coming months. But it does really help. You're going to read this book, pre-order it, and you can do that through Amazon. All Chris's pinned tweets and all that stuff in the book process. It helps to have them pre-ordered. So if you know you're going to do it, help Chris out. Order that book in advance, and we'll all do like book club this summer and I read it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dane. Appreciate you.
All right. Next up will be Kyle and I on Friday morning. We'll talk about whatever goes on with this Bucks game. Until then, he's Chris. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.